Hey everybody, this is Nate Charles, founder and managing partner of Charles Legal Services, back with another educational video. I don't like to reinvent the wheel, so I searched YouTube for a video on how to do a basic investigation because I wanted that for my employees, and I couldn't find one that was worth a damn. I am a former Navy SEAL officer. I'm a former federal prosecutor in the counterintelligence section of the United States Department of Justice. I've been there and I've done that, and I'm here to tell you most of the time an investigation is not sexy, and it shouldn't be. If you are doing something that seems cloak and dagger, you're probably doing it wrong. Don't ever do something complicated and risky if something simple and easy is going to work just fine. So yeah, if you're looking on for a video on how to be sneaky, you're in the wrong spot. Just go ahead and click away. You don't need to watch this. If you want to do a professional investigation that is actually going to matter, keep listening. Here's what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about planning your investigation, which is by far the most important technique. Then we're going to talk about executing your investigation, which involves collecting data, using structured analytic techniques to find the patterns in that data, building a product that is going to accomplish your goals, and then disseminating that product to the people that matter, to the decision makers. Now, right up front, there's a couple of golden rules for investigation. All right, these are important. These are just sort of a set of general maxims you should keep in mind, no matter whenever you're doing any kind of investigation. One, try to never assume anything. Your job is not necessarily to prove a point. Your job is to be open-minded and try and find the truth, whether that truth actually represents your assumptions or not. Which gets to the next point. If you have to make an assumption, try and seek out evidence that disproves your assumption. Don't get stuck in cognitive bias. Don't make an assumption and then rule out all the evidence that tends to refute your assumption just because it doesn't support your assumption. Always be looking for data that challenges your assumptions, and that's the only way you're going to get to the truth. And the last one, and this maybe is most important, don't mistake impressive for important. I've had investigations that have turned on the most mundane detail in the world, like a phone number. You'll find a phone number that links one set of data to another set of data and ends up just like closing the whole gap. It's not sexy. It's not like the proverbial smoking gun, but it's important. The most important details may be mundane. They don't necessarily have to be impressive. So don't get shiny object syndrome. Don't hone in on the things that look impressive. Take a neutral stance on all the data that you're getting and hone in on the important details, which may or may not actually be impressive. Now, as I said, planning your investigation is maybe the most important step. All right. Failure to plan is planning to fail. Said it 1,000 times, it's still true. You need to put your effort into creating a plan for a good investigation, because even if you deviate from that plan, and guess what, you will have at least put the thought that's into the process that's necessary to get a good product on the back end. Now, as with any other type of operation, you should always start with the goal in mind. Start at the end and work backwards as you're planning. What is the goal of the investigation? Right? Who is your audience? Who is the decision maker that you need to influence? Who is the decision maker that you need to inform? Right? What type of dissemination is most appropriate for that audience? We'll go over that in a little bit more detail later on. As you're building that product, what structured analytic technique is going to be most appropriate to build that deliverable? And what information is necessary in order to form that analysis? Once you know the information that's necessary, or you determine what information is going to be necessary, how do you go about collecting that information? This is all the kinds of stuff that goes into planning an investigation. Now, again, you need to start by examining what your goal is. And what your goal is usually depends on the next question, which is who is your audience? Now, again, the goal of any particular investigation depends largely on who the decision maker is that you are trying to inform. Invariably, an investigation is meant to inform a decision maker. But who that decision maker is, the interests that they represent, are going to depend a lot on what types of information needs to be included in that investigation. So we're going to take a couple of minutes to talk about a very admittedly inexhaustive list of who those decision makers might be and the types of information that they're likely to be interested in based on the questions that they're going to be asking themselves. If you are an attorney engaged in some kind of litigation, either criminal or civil, your audience might be a jury. That is the ultimate audience. That is the decision maker that you need to inform. That jury is going to be asking themselves whether or not to find somebody guilty or liable in a civil capacity. And the questions they're probably going to be asking themselves are, has the state or the plaintiff proven its case beyond a reasonable burden of proof? Or beyond the burden of proof that's necessary for that particular type of case. You might be working with police officers, in which case the police officer is going to be asking themselves, do I have probable cause to arrest someone? The type of information that goes into that may be a little bit different than even the prosecutor or another attorney that's involved in litigation. You might be an investigator supporting the insurance industry. You might be working with an insurance adjuster who's asking themselves, is this loss that this person sustained covered under the policy that my company has written? In which case, they're going to be, they're deciding whether or not they're going to pay out on that claim. You might be working with a politician who wants to decide whether or not to vote a certain way on a certain policy implementation, or sort of a certain policy that's been proposed. That politician is likely to be asking themselves, is the proposal good for my constituents? And you may even be working with investors. Okay, investors are trying to decide whether to buy or sell an interest in a particular investment. And the question they're inevitably going to be asking themselves is the value of this commodity or equity likely to go up or down? So again, the questions that the audience are going to be asking are going to drive how that investigation is conducted. Now, once you've determined who your audience is and what the objective is for a particular investigation, the very next question you should be asking is the one that comes just a little bit earlier in the actual conduct of the investigation as you're moving backwards through your plan. And that is, how do you get that information into the heads of the people that need to make the decision, right? What is the proper and most appropriate method of disseminating the information that you are collecting in your investigation to the audience? Now, once you've identified who your audience is, you also need to take into account who that person is, what their personality is, what style of learning is going to be best for that particular person. There are some legendary stories about various presidents of the United States who get what's called the PDB, the President's Daily Brief, every day. A highlight of all the most important intelligence matters that are going on throughout the world. Every single day, the president gets this briefing. Various presidents have different styles of absorbing that briefing. So that even the president of the United States, who is practically the ultimate decision maker in not only the United States but throughout the world, even the various individuals who have been president take that briefing in different sorts of ways. President Obama loved to get it on an iPad. President Bush loved to read things. He was an attorney, so he loved to read through the brief, just like you would read through a legal brief. President Trump loved to get it verbally. He liked to have a conversation with a dialogue and a back and forth with the briefer. Even similar styles, or even similar people with similar positions, decision makers making similar decisions may require a different type of dissemination or a different style of dissemination, even if the questions they're asking are ultimately pretty similar. Now we're going to talk next about analysis. Okay, once you've collected your data, you need to analyze it before it actually means anything in the product that you're going to build. Okay. Now, structured analytical techniques could be there. I mean, there are infinite numbers of structured analytical techniques, but fortunately for us, 99% of the time, the one that's going to be most appropriate is one of the three that we're about to talk about. These are the big three, the three most common types of analysis that you're going to use with the data that you collect in an investigation. All right, and these are going to sound very, very simplistic, and they are. Like, these don't have to be complicated. The first one is a temporal analysis. You take your data and you put it into a timeline, and you'd be amazed. You will be amazed at how much knowledge starts to flow from your analysis just by putting stuff on a timeline. People tend to remember things and think about things in a chronological order because that's the way we live our lives. Just dropping data into a timeline can do wonders. The next one is geospatial, plotting points on a map. Again, you will be shocked at how much starts to emerge out of the data just by plotting points in physical space on a map. It's amazing. And then the next one, which we've been using a lot over the last 20 years during the global war on terror, because it's excellent for analyzing clandestine networks, is relational, i.e., social network analysis, block and line diagrams. These are these webs of photos and push pins and yarn that you see in all of your old timey organized crime type movies. It's a simple technique, and the reason you see it in all those movies is because it works really well. 95% of the time, one of those three structured analytical techniques is going to be the one for you. Now, again, let's just go over to these three techniques in a little bit more detail. Temporal, it's the least technical. You can do it with a sheet of notebook paper. It's very easy to do on a Word document. You just write things out in a timeline. It's the most frequently used, especially by me in the legal field. When you're talking about a tort, somebody doing something wrong for which they might be liable to another person, somebody committing a crime. You're talking about somebody's actions in space and time. Just putting those actions out into timeline can make your case most of the time. Again, very appropriate in the context of a court case. Now, geospatial analysis. This works wonders in a military context. When you're talking about a military conflict in traditional space and time, where you got forces moving across the battlefield, some sort of geospatial analysis, some sort of military intelligence type process, it's very frequently going to involve plotting out points on a map, and geospatial analysis is the way you do that. Another one is relational. These are your noded link charts, your social network analysis. We use this quite a bit in the global war on terror, and in Iraq and Afghanistan and elsewhere in the world when I was in special operations. This is how you start to understand the relationships between people in organizations, especially clandestine networks like terror cells. The other place that you're going to start seeing this coming up, I think even more and more, is in cyberspace. On the internet, there is no physical space. There's no nodes to plot on a map, but there damn sure are nodes, wires and cables between computers, between people, and certain nodes on an informational network. The relational structured analytic technique is going to be great for some of your cyber investigations. Now, which one of these techniques you use, or perhaps a different one, is really the key to experience. That is one of the things that you need to gain by experience as an investigator. You may not initially know what's going to work, so we'll try one of them, and maybe it's not the most appropriate one. Then you go back and try a different one, and if that one doesn't work, try another one. Again, as I was just describing the application of those big three structured analytic techniques, I was pulling a lot from my personal experience. You're going to have to gain some of that experience. It's going to take practice to get familiar with which structured analytic technique is most appropriate to the type of investigation that you're performing. But you'll get there. Now, once you've determined what your goal is, you determine who your audience is, you determine what kind of product they're going to need, and you determine what sort of analysis is going to go into creating that product, you end up at the first step, which is data collection. Now, as you're collecting your data, I really can't stress this enough. You need to use the KISS principle, and I'm not talking about those guys in the background. What I mean is, keep it simple, stupid, okay? Don't do something cloak and dagger. Don't do something risky or complicated when something simple and safe is going to work just as well. As you are collecting data for your investigation, you should always start, finish, and frequently readdress your open sources, okay? Google it. Just start with Googling it. I'm not saying you should stop with Googling it. Googling it is not research. Googling it is not investigation, but it's a pretty good place to start. Once you've Googled it and you've gotten some very basic familiarity with the issues at hand, use commercial databases, things like Clear or something at your library. Use online mapping programs, if you, like Google Earth, if you're going to be doing any sort of geospatial type analytical techniques. Use your library and use your librarians. People think that now that we've got the internet, that librarians are superfluous, that they're out of date, and that nothing could be further from the truth. Librarians are professionals who understand how data is structured, the best way to find good and reliable data, and the best way to evaluate the credibility of data, perhaps more than any other professional out there. Librarians are critical. Use them. Now, once you've gotten familiar with the basics using your open source techniques, then you should rely on the next most complicated set. And when I mean the next most complicated, I don't mean incredibly complicated at all. 99% of the cases that are brought to court in the United States are investigated and resolved using just the techniques that are on this page, and they're the ones that are written into the rules of evidence at both at the federal level and in almost every state in the country. These are the techniques that are going to get 99% of the information that you are going to need. Interrogatories, which is really nothing more than asking people questions in writing. The next one, depositions by oral examination, just like interrogatories, except you're asking people the questions out loud, and you're doing it in some kind of recording. And 34, Federal Rule of Evidence 34, producing documents, electronically stored information, and tangible things are entering onto land for inspection and other purposes. That is the Federal Rule of Evidence that covers collecting documents, inspecting things, and visiting places to look and see what's going on there. And that's it. Now, as simple as those techniques sound, there are some finer points on doing it properly. When you're collecting up a load of documents, and you're going to have hundreds and hundreds of documents involved in some investigations, so you need to stay organized, right? Keep track of where those documents are coming from. There's nothing more frustrating than having a document that you realize, again, contains one of those mundane details that makes your investigation, and you don't remember where you got it. That's a problem. So keep track of your document sources. As you are collecting up documents and starting to plug them into your structured analytic techniques, like your timeline, give those documents an exhibit number or a Bates stamp. All right, Bates stamps are really easy to apply using programs like Adobe PDF, where you could just literally plug an exhibit number on the top of a document. That makes it really easy to track where data is coming from and make references to those documents as you're conducting your analysis and in disseminating your analysis through your product. All right. And again, if you do give something an exhibit number or Bates number, try and avoid renumbering things as you move through your investigation so you don't confuse yourself as you're going. Now, as simple as conducting an interview sounds, and it's not that complicated, there are some finer points to it. Avoid asking leading questions. Don't ask questions like, isn't it true that you were there at a certain place and time? Because they may say yes, maybe because that's what they think you want to hear, or maybe just because they're lazy. And then all of a sudden you've made an assumption about something that may or may not even be true, and you've injected some sort of false narrative into your own investigation. So don't do that. The way to avoid that, and this takes a little bit of practice, is to ask questions that start with the 5 W's. Who, what, where, when, why, and how. By asking questions that start with those basic question words that you learned in elementary school, you force somebody to give a narrative response. And that does 2 things. One, it's them giving the information, not you validating your own assumptions. But also, they may say things in the process of giving you that narrative that leads to additional questions. Leads. Ask the question and then listen to what they're saying so you can pick up on the leads that they're offering you. And again, you want to record the interview or commit it to writing. And even better than just committing it to writing, see if you can commit that interview to a writing that they are willing to swear to in front of a notary in the form of a sworn affidavit. That way you can just submit some of this stuff into evidence. Now again, keep it simple, stupid. 99% of the time, that's it. Use your open sources for background research. Revisit those open sources as often as necessary. Ask good questions, either in writing or in a recorded interview if possible. And collect the documents that are necessary to fill in the gaps in your investigation. Those 3 things will be all the information that you need 99% of the time. That's it. Now, In rare circumstances, like I said, probably about 1% of the time, you may feel that there's a need to do something else, right? Something a little bit more cloak and dagger, something that one of those yahoos on YouTube is offering. You may think you might need to do some physical surveillance. You may think that you need to do like a wiretap or an electronic monitoring, some sort of invasive medical examination. You may need to interview somebody in a way that sort of misrepresents what it is that you are there to do or even who you are. Or you may want to interrogate them using some sort of an emotional approach, okay? Or something else. But here's the problem. If you're a civilian, those things are in most instances going to be illegal. You can't do them unless you are a government actor, like a police officer or intelligence officer. And even then, you may require a warrant or a court order to do those kinds of things. So just don't. You're not going to need that type of information 99% of the time. Keep it simple, stupid. Don't do something sexy and dangerous when something simple and reliable is going to work. Now, you've planned your investigation. It's time to do the fun part. Let's go out and execute. Okay, so here's the process. We planned in reverse, and now we're going to execute going forward. We're going to start collecting our information. Then we're going to take that information. We're going to use one of our structured analytic techniques to analyze the data. Then we're going to use the results of that structured analytic technique to build our product. And then we're going to disseminate that product to our audience. But even then, it's not that simple. Like I said, the plan is the thing from which you will inevitably deviate. You're going to start doing your analysis and realize there are gaps in your data, and you have to go back and collect more information. When you start building your product, you're going to realize that the structured analytic technique you used initially is maybe not the best one for the product that you're building or the audience you're going to disseminate that product to. So you're going to have to go back and do some initial analysis using a different structured analytic technique. And then even once you disseminate your product to the audience is likely to come back with follow-up questions. The presentation of the information you've collected is just going to inspire them to ask more questions. So you're going to have to go back, maybe just to building them a new product, but maybe even going back to collecting new data entirely. Now, I said keep it simple, stupid. If this sounds too simplistic for you, take a look at this. This diagram right here comes straight out of official military doctrine. Joint Publication 2-0, published by the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. This is the intelligence cycle. This is what the intelligence community uses as its most fundamental process diagram for how it conducts intelligence on behalf of the national security of the United States. Planning and direction, collection, processing and exploitation, analysis and production, dissemination. Does that sound familiar? It should. It's pretty much exactly what I just told you. This isn't rocket science, and neither is what they are doing. So before we sign off, let's review those golden rules of investigation one more time. Don't make any assumptions if you have to. If you are forced to make an assumption, seek out data that refutes your assumptions rather than validating it. Don't get stuck in cognitive bias. Don't mistake impressive for important. The important details may be mundane. Don't get fixated on what's shiny and impressive. Focus on the things that actually connect the dots. The most important things may not necessarily be impressive. This is what we covered in today's lesson. We talked about planning your investigation. We talked about dissemination techniques, structured analytic techniques, and how to collect good data for your investigation. Once again, I am Nate Charles. I am the managing partner and founder of Charles Legal Services. If you got any questions for us, feel free to reach out to us. info@charleslegalservices.com, www.charleslegalservices.com, or you can call us at our Potomac, Maryland office, 240-406-4977. And this QR code that's right above me, that is a QR code to our website and all of the information necessary to get in touch with us. Whip out your smartphone, go back through any of these slides, go back through this video, take a snap of that. You'll get in touch with us and we can help you out. We pride ourselves on conducting thorough, professional investigations that get results. We would love to work for you. We'd love to work with you. If you need advice, reach out to us. We're happy to help. If you need a good lawyer or you need a good investigation to get to the bottom of something, we can definitely help you out. We're here for you. Have a great day. Looking forward to talking to you next time.